In the quiet halls of an Air Force base in Germany, a dark story began to unfold. It was not about war or secret missions, but about something far more personal. It was a story of betrayal inside a family, hidden in something as simple as a morning cup of coffee. The woman at the center of this case was 39-year-old Melody Feliciano Johnson from Arizona. She was accused of trying to murder her husband, an Air Force man, by slowly poisoning his coffee with bleach. The couple was living together in Germany with their child. They were preparing to move back to Arizona, but their marriage was already falling apart. The husband, later identified as Robbie Johnson, had filed for divorce in March 2023. Around that time, he noticed that his coffee suddenly tasted strange and bitter. At first, he kept drinking it, though he was suspicious. For 2 or 3 weeks, he continued to drink the odd-tasting coffee. Finally, he decided to test it using chlorine test strips. The results showed high levels of chlorine, a chemical found in bleach. Bleach is common in cleaning products, but when swallowed, it is very dangerous. It can burn the throat, damage the stomach, and even harm organs inside the body. Robbie realized that his wife might be poisoning him. He also remembered that she had recently bought a house in the Philippines without telling him, and that she had asked questions about his life insurance. To him, it looked like a plan for money. Even though he now knew something was very wrong, he pretended to drink the coffee and acted normal, but he started to gather proof. In May 2023, he set up a hidden camera in their home. The camera allegedly captured Melody pouring something into the coffee pot. When the family returned to the United States in late June, Robbie continued his plan. At Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, Arizona, he set up another camera in their hotel room. The camera allegedly caught Melody again pouring a liquid into the coffee machine. The next day, he went to the police, but officers said the video was not clear enough to prove what the liquid was. Robbie did not give up. When the family moved into a permanent home on July 7th, he set up more cameras. This time, the cameras reportedly showed Melody pouring bleach into a container and then into the coffee machine. With this new evidence, Robbie went back to the police. A search of their home found a container under Melody's bathroom sink that smelled strongly of bleach. The coffee machine also smelled like bleach, and the liquid inside was suspicious. Melody Johnson was soon arrested. She faced serious charges: attempted first-degree homicide, attempted aggravated assault, and poisoning food or drink. Bond was set at $250,000 because she had strong family ties abroad and owned property in the Philippines. The case dragged on for months, but the outcome surprised many. Melinda admitted in court that she had tried to poison Robbie, but she received a very light sentence, 3 years of probation. The more serious charges of attempted murder were dropped as part of a plea deal. The judge said Robbie had asked that she not go to prison, though he never explained why. Along with probation, Melinda was ordered to undergo a mental health evaluation and follow any treatment recommended. She was also banned from contacting Robbie except for legal matters. Her lawyer explained that Melinda suffered from anxiety and depression and had been in a toxic marriage. Criminal experts noted that while her attempt to poison Robbie showed intent, it was poorly planned. Using bleach in coffee is obvious because of the smell and taste, which suggested she was not very careful. This lack of sophistication may have influenced the judge's decision to give probation instead of jail. Melinda Johnson is free under supervision, required to get mental health treatment, and restricted from contacting her husband. On June 10, 1990, British Airways Flight 5390 was flying to Spain when one of the cockpit windows suddenly blew out. The blast of air partially sucked Captain Tim Lancaster out of the plane. A flight attendant grabbed his legs to stop him from being pulled out completely. Tim's body was bent around the window, freezing in the -2°C air. 2 other crew members helped hold on to him while the co-pilot struggled to control the plane, which was falling. Eventually, they managed to pull Tim back inside, and the co-pilot landed the plane safely in Southampton. Amazingly, Tim survived with multiple injuries, frostbite, and a concussion. Later, it was discovered the accident happened because the wrong size bolts had been used to secure the cockpit window. Romany travelers photographed by John Thompson in 1877. They're gathered around a caravan belonging to one William Hampton. The woman seated on the steps, Mary Pratt, was murdered a few weeks after the photograph was taken. When we think about the working class in Victorian Britain, we often picture them living in dark, crowded terrace houses or in tall, dirty buildings called tenements. But not everyone lived that way. Some people chose a life on the road. They liked the freedom of moving from place to place. These people often worked as street sellers in the winter, selling cheap goods. In the warmer months, they earned money at fairs or by picking fruit and hops. During the cold months, groups of caravan dwellers could be found camped on empty land around London, especially in Battersea and Wandsworth. Some of these camps were very poor, with people living in old carts, tents, or under sheets of canvas. Horses were tied nearby and dogs were everywhere. But the caravans themselves, although tiny and cramped, were often neat and tidy. Many owners kept them as clean as any small home. Inside there was usually a little fireplace with shiny brass or copper pots hanging above it. A table might sit under the window, which was often covered with curtains. At the back of the van there was a white bed that stretched across the wagon. It looked large, but in truth it was not enough for a whole family. Children often slept under the bed or outside in a tent. Writers and photographers of the time, like John Thompson and Adolph Smith, recorded the lives of these caravan people. They wanted to show the struggles and daily lives of the poor in London. While a few managed to earn good money buying cheap and selling for more, most lived hard lives. Sometimes even getting enough food was a struggle. But when money was plenty, many spent it quickly on drinking and gambling. These wandering people formed their own groups. They did not follow the normal rules of steady work or permanent homes. Instead, they traveled around selling goods, visiting fairs, and sometimes working in the countryside during harvest season. They were not always easy to track, since they moved whenever they felt the need, or if trouble forced them to leave an area. They rarely made long-term plans and lived day to day. Some of these wanderers were connected to gypsies, though not all admitted it. Many caravan families denied being gypsies, while gypsies themselves took pride in their heritage. Still, similarities in looks and lifestyle often showed a link between the two. One photograph taken in Battersea showed a group gathered around the caravan of William Hampton. Among his fellows, he was thought of as a fair and honest man. But when one reporter got to know him, he felt William's good reputation might have been exaggerated. William had no formal education, like many of his companions, but he was clever in his own way. He admitted openly that he loved the roaming life and could never settle in one place. Interestingly, he disliked education. He thought it made people worse, not better, and distrusted anyone who could read and write, saying they were more likely to cheat others. In that same photograph was a woman named Mary Pratt, who was later found dead under suspicious circumstances. She was about 55 years old and had lived a hard life. Though once decent and respectable, she had turned to drink in her later years. Witnesses spoke of her troubles and the strange events on the night she died, but no one could say for sure what had happened. Her story was just one of many sad tales among the caravan people. Not all wanderers were poor, though. Some made great amounts of money. One man, known as Mo, carried thousands of pounds in his van. He was even robbed once of a very large sum. Despite his wealth, he continued to live as a traveling hawker before eventually settling down. Stories like his showed that while many caravan people struggled to survive, others managed to grow rich. Final photos of Avicii, a few days before he died in Oman back in 2018, and it was ruled that he did it to himself. Swell Season Concert Incident. On August 19, 2010, the band Swell Season was playing a concert at the Mountain Winery in Saratoga, California. Everything seemed normal until around 10 p.m. During a short break between songs, the lead singer Glenn Hansard spoke to the crowd. Suddenly, A man who had left his seat earlier was now spotted on a rooftop above the stage, about 30 feet high. In front of the shocked audience, the man fell and landed just a few feet away from Hansard. Many people first thought it was part of the show, maybe a dummy being used as a prop, but it quickly became clear that it was real. Hansard dropped his guitar in shock, and staff rushed to help. A doctor in the audience came forward, and paramedics tried CPR, but after an hour the man was declared dead. The victim was identified as Michael Edward Pickles. He had been at the show with a friend, but even his friend said they had no idea why Michael decided to do this. Earlier that year, Michael had been arrested after a violent fight with his girlfriend on New Year's Day. He had pointed a loaded shotgun at her, threatened to kill them both, and tied her legs. She begged him not to hurt her, and when he finally let her go, she escaped to a friend's house and called police. Authorities negotiated with Michael for over an hour before he gave himself up. He was later charged with assault with a firearm, domestic violence, and false imprisonment. By the time of the concert, he was out on a $150,000 bail and waiting for a court date that October. For the audience, the concert quickly turned into a nightmare. After the fall, staff asked everyone to move to the plaza so emergency vehicles could get inside. Wild West train robber Tom Ketchum, also known as Black Jack, on the gallows. He was the only person hanged in the history of Union County, New Mexico territory, and the executioners were inexperienced and used too long a rope, which led to a traumatic detachment of the head. This is Erin Caffey with her father. Looks pretty normal until you hear the full story. 16-year-old Erin Caffey lived with her family in Alba, Texas. Alba is a very small town with only about 400 people, located around 80 miles east of Dallas. Erin's father, Terry, was 41 years old and worked as a home health aide. Her mother, Penny, was 37 and worked as a substitute driver, delivering meals to people in need. Erin also had two younger brothers, Matthew, age 13, and Tyler, age 8. When Erin was 13, the family moved to Alba so they could be closer to their church. Church was very important to them. They all played instruments and sang there often. At first, Erin and her brothers went to public school. But after a girl kissed Erin in the hallway one day, her parents pulled all three children out and decided to homeschool them. In July 2007, Erin turned 16 and got a part-time job as a waitress at a Sonic restaurant in a nearby town. That's where she met 17-year-old Charlie Wilkinson. The two quickly became close, and by the end of the summer, they were dating. Charlie even gave Erin a promise ring, which symbolized his devotion to her. Erin's parents didn't like Charlie. Terry especially felt that Charlie was disrespectful. Because of this, they only allowed Erin to see him once a week. Erin and Charlie didn't like these rules and talked about running away together when she turned 17. In February 2008, Penny caught Erin talking to Charlie late at night on the phone, which was against the rules. As punishment, Erin's parents took away her weekly visits with Charlie. A short time later, her parents told Erin that she had to end the relationship for good. On the outside, Erin pretended to be relieved, but in truth, she was furious. She began telling her friends that she wanted her parents dead. She brought up the idea of killing them so often that her friends grew tired of hearing it. Erin eventually convinced Charlie that the only way for them to be together was if her parents were gone. Charlie offered his friend Charles Wade $2,000 to help him with the murders. Wade's girlfriend, Bobby Johnson, also became involved. On the night of March 1st, 2008, the group gathered outside the Caffey home. Erin joined Charlie, Wade, and Bobby in Bobby's car. They drove around for about an hour, discussing what to do. Charlie suggested they run away instead, but Erin insisted that her parents had to die. The plan was simple but horrifying. Charlie would kill Erin's parents, while Wade killed her brothers. They had a small gun and two samurai-style swords with them. When Charlie asked Erin if she was okay with her brothers also being killed, she reportedly told him, "Just do what you have to do." Charlie and Wade entered the house while Erin and Bobby stayed in the car. Inside, Charlie shot at Terry and Penny, but the gun jammed. Wade fixed the gun and fired again. He then attacked Penny with his sword, killing her. Terry was shot and badly wounded, but he survived by pretending to be dead. The killers then went upstairs, where Matthew and Tyler had tried to hide. Matthew was shot, and Tyler was stabbed to death. Believing everyone was dead, the attackers set the house on fire and left. But Terry was still alive. Even though he was badly injured, he crawled nearly 900 feet to a neighbor's house. The neighbor called 911, and Terry told them that Charlie Wilkinson was behind the attack. Terry was taken to the hospital and survived. Police quickly tracked down everyone involved. At first, Erin pretended she was a victim, saying she woke up in a burning house and was taken away by strangers. But both Charlie and Wade told police that Erin was the one who planned everything. In court, Charlie and Wade were both sentenced to life in prison without parole. Erin received 2 life sentences plus 25 more years. She won't be eligible for release until she is 59 years old. Bobby Johnson received 40 years and could be released after serving 24. Terry eventually recovered from his injuries. He later remarried, left his old job, and became a minister. Despite everything, he still stays in contact with Erin. Erin was described as sheltered, naive, and immature. She had trouble in school, struggled with ADHD, and often felt trapped by her parents' strict rules. When she met Charlie, she became fixated on him. Instead of choosing to rebel in small ways, she believed killing her family was the only solution. In the end, immaturity, impulsiveness, and poor judgment led to a tragedy that destroyed multiple lives. This haunting photograph from the 1890s shows 3 neglected children sleeping on the cold streets of New York City. At the time, thousands of poor and abandoned children were left to survive on their own, a dark and hidden reality of the city's rapid growth. Chloe Valentine. In 2007, a little girl named Chloe Valentine was born in Adelaide, South Australia. Her mother, Ashley, was only 16 years old at the time. Life for Chloe was unstable right from the start. Ashley struggled with drug addiction, especially meth, and was often involved in violent relationships. Their home life was unsafe, dirty, and chaotic. Chloe's grandmother and other relatives quickly saw that the child was in danger. They reported their concerns to the authorities many times. Neighbors, police officers, and even strangers also reported problems. In fact, more than 20 reports were made to the Child Protection Agency. People said the house was full of garbage and cockroaches, and that Chloe was left hungry, dirty, or wandering around with strangers while her mother went out partying. Despite all of these warnings, the system never removed Chloe from her mother's care. The agency often closed cases, accepted Ashley's excuses, and decided it was best for Chloe to stay with her mother. Instead of protecting Chloe, they left her in the same dangerous situation. By 2012, when Chloe was 4 years old, things took a tragic turn. Ashley was living with her boyfriend, Ben McPartland. Together, they made Chloe ride a small motorbike in the backyard. She was far too young and small to handle it safely. She kept falling off, crashing again and again. Each time she got hurt, but instead of stopping and helping her, Ashley and Ben kept making her do it. Even worse, they recorded videos and laughed at her pain. Over several days, Chloe suffered fall after fall. Then she crashed badly and hit her head. She became unconscious. But Ashley and Ben did not call for help right away. They searched the internet for answers and waited hours while Chloe's brain injury grew worse. Finally, when she stopped breathing, they called an ambulance. By the time Chloe reached the hospital, it was too late. She had severe head trauma and many bruises all over her body. Doctors could not save her. On January 20th, 2012, Chloe was declared dead at just 4 years old. Her family members who came to the hospital said they barely recognized her because she was so battered. The coroner, Mark Johns, carried out an inquest in 2015. His report was very critical. He said the Child Protection Agency had acted with drifting, irresolution, and aimlessness. He made it clear, if Chloe had been removed from her mother earlier, she would likely still be alive. Ashley and Ben were both found guilty of manslaughter by criminal neglect. They went to prison. But many people felt that was not enough. They were also furious at the government agency that had ignored so many warnings. Chloe's grandmother, Belinda, spoke out. She said she had begged the authorities to save Chloe's life. She offered to raise Chloe herself in a safe home, but social workers told her she had no right to take the child. Belinda loved her daughter Ashley, but she admitted Ashley was dangerous. She believed Chloe's death could have been prevented time and time again if the system had listened. One of the biggest problems was the system's focus on keeping families together at all costs. This meant children were often left with unsafe parents instead of being placed with caring relatives. Chloe should have grown up, gone to school, and lived a normal life. She loved Dora the Explorer and had a shy smile. Chloe Valentine's short life was filled with fear and neglect, but her death has pushed for change. She will always be remembered as the little girl who should have been saved. These images of Japan Air Flight 123 were taken 6 minutes before the crash into Mount Takamagahara, killing 520 people in 1985. Mr. Lee Van, a man from Vietnam who lived with his dead wife. Many people were shocked when a man revealed the strange truth hidden inside a plaster statue he had kept with him for 22 years. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than a statue, but the story behind it stunned everyone. The man was named Mr. Van, from Vietnam. As a young man, he married Mrs. Sang, his childhood sweetheart. Life was hard, but together they raised 7 children. Mr. Van worked by splitting stone, while his wife stayed home to care for the family and earned extra money by making incense sticks. Though poor, their life was filled with love. In 2003, tragedy struck. While Mr. Van was working away from home, he learned that his wife had died from an illness. He rushed back but only saw her face briefly before she was buried. Heartbroken, he spent nights sitting by her grave, often sleeping there in the cold. After nearly 2 years, his health declined from staying out in the rain and wind. He thought about digging into her grave to be near her, but his children stopped him. Still, Mr. Van could not let go. One stormy night, he secretly dug at the grave to take something from it. Then he hid it. Then he had an idea. He would make a statue of his wife. Using plaster and cement, he sculpted her figure. He even dressed the statue in clothes, painted its nails, and put lipstick on its face. To his children, it looked like a strange way of showing grief. But inside the statue, he had placed what he had taken from the grave. Mr. Van slept beside the statue every night. He explained that he once had a dream where he saw holy beings and gates of heaven. In the dream, he was sent back to his wife's grave. He believed this was a divine sign telling him to bring her home. When his children learned the truth, they were horrified. Some threatened to cut ties with him unless he returned the remains properly, but Mr. Van refused. He believed that by keeping his wife close, she would not feel lonely or cold. News of this spread quickly, and authorities became involved and questioned him. At first, he denied everything, but later confessed. Under the law, his actions went against burial rules. Still, since he acted out of love and not crime, officials only asked him to rebury the statue. He refused. His children and neighbors, though shocked, eventually accepted his choice. For 22 years, Mr. Van continued to live with the statue. Even as he grew old and sick, he cared for it daily, changing its clothes, cleaning it, and repainting its nails. He told reporters that his wife loved having her nails painted, so he did it to keep her happy. Some neighbors believed Mr. Van was simply too devoted to let go. Others thought he might be possessed. Doctors explained it as a syndrome. People with this disorder cannot accept the death of a loved one and act as if the person is still alive. Similar cases have been reported worldwide. In China, a man once preserved his son's body in a freezer so he could still talk to him. In the United States, a woman named Jean Stevens lived with her husband's body for more than 10 years, and later even brought home her sister's remains. In Mr. Van's case, he never remarried, and devoted the rest of his life to caring for the plaster statue of his wife. This photo was taken in 1934 and shows the strange trend of baby cages. In the early 1900s, doctors started telling parents who lived in apartments to use these cages so their babies could get more sunlight. For a few decades, this unusual idea was actually quite popular. But because it was so risky, the trend eventually faded away, and judging by some of the pictures of these cages, that was probably a good thing. On the afternoon of May 3, 2000, a 17-year-old boy in Japan posted strange and cryptic comments on an online board. His username was Neo Mugicha, which means Neo Barley Tea. Soon after writing his post, he left his room with a knife and carried out one of the most shocking bus hijackings in Japan's history. At 12:56 p.m., the boy boarded an express bus called the Wakakusa in Shiga City. There were 20 other passengers on board, and the bus was heading for Fukuoka. Not long after departure, around 1:35 p.m., the boy suddenly stood up, pulled out a large kitchen knife, and confronted the driver. He told the driver that he was taking control of the bus and warned passengers that they were no longer going to their destination, but to hell. He ordered everyone to throw away their phones, watches, and jackets, and forced them to sit in certain places. Men at the very back, women in the middle, and a 6-year-old girl named Yuki, who was traveling alone, stayed near the front behind the driver. The boy closed all the curtains so nobody outside could see what was happening. To prove he was serious, instead of waking her up, he just slashed a sleeping woman across the neck, leaving her badly injured. Fear spread quickly among the passengers as they realized he was willing to harm anyone who disobeyed. The bus continued down the highway while the boy waved the knife and gave cold stares at the passengers. He told the driver to head toward Okayama, far away from their original destination. At one point, the driver asked if the child, Yuki, could be released, but the boy refused. Later, passengers asked to use a toilet. The boy allowed them to stop at a rest area, but when a woman ran away instead of returning, he became furious. To show his anger, he attacked another female passenger with his knife. Luckily, the woman who escaped called the police from an emergency phone, finally alerting them about the hijacking after nearly 90 minutes. Soon after, another woman managed to jump out of a bus window. This enraged the boy again, and he slashed another passenger repeatedly. A man also escaped later by leaping from a window when the bus slowed down, causing the boy to attack yet another victim. Each escape attempt led to more violence. During this time, the boy even called the police several times on his own mobile phone. He made strange demands, such as asking for a handgun, but then turned off his phone and stopped answering. Thanks to these calls, police learned his identity and background. The hijacked bus was now traveling across different prefectures while helicopters and patrol cars followed. News stations began broadcasting the situation live. Police set up roadblocks but were careful not to anger the boy further. By evening, police forced the bus into a parking area in Hiroshima. Negotiations began, and food, drinks, and blankets were given to the passengers. 3 injured women were allowed to leave, but sadly, one 68-year-old woman, Tatsuko Tsukamoto, died from blood loss. The boy had now become a murderer. The rest of the night passed with tense negotiations. Police trained nearby with an identical bus model, preparing ways to break in safely. Around midnight, 2 elderly women were released, but most passengers, including the child, remained trapped. The boy sometimes showed a softer side to Yuki, but he continued threatening others. By dawn on May 4th, the police special assault team decided to act. At 5 a.m., while a negotiator distracted the boy, 15 officers surrounded the bus. On a signal, they threw stun grenades, smashed windows, and rushed inside. In the chaos, one officer was lightly injured, but they managed to overpower the boy and take his knife. All passengers were rescued, including Yuki, who survived without physical injuries. At 5:05 a.m., after nearly 17 hours, the terrifying ordeal was finally over. The hijacker's background revealed troubling signs. He had once been a good student, but was bullied in junior high. After a serious back injury from a fall, he quit high school and became a hikikomori. He spent almost all his time on the computer, browsing dark online forums, and became violent toward his parents, sister, and even their pet dog. His parents begged for help from schools, police, and hospitals, but little was done. Even when he stayed in a psychiatric hospital, he fooled staff with polite behavior, hiding his violent side. In truth, he was already planning an attack. Inspired by another teenager who had recently committed murder, he decided to strike before turning 18, when harsher punishment would apply. Originally, he planned to attack his old school, but since it was closed for holidays, he chose to hijack a bus instead. Because the boy was 17, Japanese law treated him as a minor. This meant he could not be charged with murder or other crimes in the same way an adult would be. He was only sent to a juvenile hospital for 6 years, then released back into society at age 23. He never apologized to victims or their families. This angered many people in Japan, leading to calls for stricter laws for young offenders. But little has changed, and even today, teenagers under 18 who commit serious crimes may avoid heavy punishment. Fire escape collapse. This 1975 photo shows a mother, her 2-year-old daughter, and a firefighter during a rescue in Boston. Seconds after it was taken, the fire escape collapsed, sending them falling. The mother was killed, but the child survived by landing on her body. The image won the Pulitzer Prize and prompted stricter fire escape safety regulations. This harmless-looking old man sitting inside an airplane is anything but harmless. He is a serial killer named Charles Sobraj. Charles Sobraj, later called the Serpent, was one of the most dangerous criminals of the 1970s. He started small, just stealing cars and robbing people in France, but over time his crimes became darker and deadlier. In the early 1970s, he traveled to Thailand with his girlfriend. Once there, he built a plan to trick and rob mostly Western tourists. His method was simple but cruel. He would befriend backpackers, earn their trust, and then secretly drug their food or drinks. When they became weak or sick, he would steal their passports, money, and belongings. At first, it was just theft, but soon, robbery was not enough for him. One of his first known murders was of an American woman he had befriended. After drugging her, instead of just stealing her things, he drowned her in the ocean. A short time later, he killed another tourist, burning the body and leaving it by the road. When the victim's girlfriend started asking too many questions, Charles killed her too, drowning her just like the first. Charles kept moving from place to place, always looking for new victims. He lured a young Dutch couple to Thailand, drugged them, and then strangled and burned them. Using their passports, he and his girlfriend escaped Thailand and went to Nepal. There, they murdered a Canadian man and an American woman, stabbing them and setting their bodies on fire. With stolen passports, Charles traveled widely: Nepal, India, Singapore, and back to Thailand. He left a trail of dead or missing tourists wherever he went. Sometimes he killed on purpose. Other times, a robbery went wrong when he gave victims too much poison. Even his close associates were not safe. One friend who had helped him commit crimes disappeared forever after Charles turned on him. One of his boldest crimes happened in New Delhi, India. He met 60 French engineering students and came up with the insane idea to drug them all at once. He put poison into 60 water bottles and started handing them out. But the drug worked too quickly, and some students began collapsing before he had finished. Others realized something was wrong, and together they overpowered him and called the police. He was arrested and sentenced to 12 years in prison for poisoning and robbery. Thailand wanted him extradited to face trial for several murders, and there he could face the death penalty. He needed a plan to avoid being sent there. He gave sedative-laced candies to prison guards who passed out and then simply walked out of the jail. Later, he allowed himself to be caught again, knowing this would get him more prison time in India. This was perfect for him because the extra 10-year sentence kept him in India long enough for the statute of limitations in Thailand to expire. When he was finally released in the 1990s, he was safe from Thai justice. For years, Charles lived free in his 50s, seemingly untouchable. But in 2003, he made a huge mistake. He returned to Nepal, forgetting or perhaps underestimating that he was still wanted there for the murders of the Canadian man and American woman from decades earlier. Nepal had no statute of limitations for murder. He was quickly recognized, arrested, and put on trial. This time, he was found guilty and sentenced to 20 years in prison. He served 19 years and was released in 2022, already in his late 70s. Despite his long criminal history, he managed to sell the film and book rights to his life story for around $15 million. Windows on the World was a famous restaurant at the very top of the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York. This photo shows people having dinner there on September 10, 2001, just one day before the 9/11 attacks destroyed the towers. Kyler Effinger. On the first day of 2024, something heartbreaking happened at the Salt Lake City International Airport. A young man named Kyler Effinger ran onto the runway, chasing a plane that was about to take off. He believed he could still get on board, but instead, this desperate act became the last mistake of his life. On January 1st, Kyler went to the airport. He was planning to fly to Colorado Springs to see his very sick grandfather. He wanted to be with him before it was too late. At first, he had planned to drive, but his father didn't want him on the road alone for 9 long hours. Instead, his dad bought him a plane ticket. Everything seemed normal when Kyler arrived at the airport. But when he reached the security checkpoint, things changed. Security officers held him up for a long time. He later told his dad he felt he was being profiled. Because of this, he missed his flight. From that moment on, his behavior became unusual and frantic. For the next 4 hours, he wandered the airport, sometimes running, sometimes arguing with staff, sometimes sitting on the floor. He even carried his shoes in his hands as he ran from gate to gate. By around 10 p.m., Kyler grew more desperate. He tried opening locked doors, hitting windows, and even throwing his shoes to break them. He was clearly trying to find a way out to the planes. He wanted to see his grandfather so badly that nothing else seemed to matter. Eventually, he made it through an emergency exit and onto the runway. Pilots waiting to take off were told to watch for a man running across the tarmac. Some reported seeing him waving his arms, wearing a yellow shirt. For several minutes, no one knew exactly where he was. Then a pilot spotted him near an aircraft. At 10:08 p.m., Kyler was seen near a plane's engine. By the time authorities reached him, he had been pulled partly into the engine, and though emergency crews tried to save him, they couldn't. After hours of confusion and panic, Kyler died that night. His parents were woken at 1 a.m. by a knock on the door. Later, it became clear why Kyler had been acting this way. He suffered from bipolar disorder, a condition that can cause extreme mood changes. His father had worried about him making the long drive alone for this very reason. Sadly, when the stress of being stopped at security hit him, it triggered a manic episode. He panicked, fearing he would never see his grandfather again. His family lost a son, a brother, and a loved one, and all because his illness took over at the worst possible time. Rest in peace, Kyler. In 1979, Flight 901 crashed into Mount Erebus in Antarctica. Sadly, there were no survivors. This photo shows 17-year-old Melinda and her half-sister Valerie just before boarding in New Zealand. The second image is of Melinda inside the cabin, taken only minutes before the crash. The recovery team had to temporarily bury remains in the snow to keep the skua gulls from eating the corpses. The last image of Ylenia Carisi before her disappearance. Ylenia Maria Carisi was born on November 29, 1970, in Rome, Italy. She was the daughter of 2 famous Italian singers, Albano Carisi and Romina Power. Romina herself was the daughter of Hollywood actor Tyrone Power and Mexican actress Linda Christian. Because of her family, Ylenia grew up in the spotlight. As a child, she appeared in a movie with her parents called Champagne in Paradiso. As a teenager, she worked as a letter turner on the Italian version of Wheel of Fortune. But Ylenia did not want to stay in the world of fame. She wanted to be a writer instead. She went to King's College in London to study literature and was one of the best students in her year. Jelenia was 5'7", slim, with strawberry blonde hair and green eyes. She spoke both Italian and English fluently. In the summer of 1993, Jelenia traveled with her parents to New Orleans in the United States. She loved the city and wanted to write her first novel about the lives of street musicians there. During this trip, she met a 54-year-old street musician named Alexander Masakala, who played the cornet. He was known for charming young women, especially tourists. While her parents continued traveling to Florida, Jelenia stayed behind in New Orleans for a short time. She later rejoined them, telling them she feared that two men had tried to drug and kill her. But soon after, she returned to New Orleans again. Jelenia dreamed of traveling the world alone. She decided to take a break from her studies, sold most of her belongings, and began backpacking. She started in Belize, where she spent months enjoying beaches and towns. She loved a small village called Hopkins. On December 27, 1993, her brother Yari came to Belize to surprise her, but she had already left. Locals told him she had boarded a bus to Mexico the day after Christmas. She then made her way back to New Orleans. On December 30th, 1993, Jelenia checked into a cheap hotel in New Orleans called Le Dale, about 5 blocks from the French Quarter. She wasn't alone. She checked in with Masakela. The hotel staff said they didn't seem romantically involved, and that Jelenia asked for 2 beds in the room. Over the next days, she spent her time with street musicians and homeless people, gathering stories for her book. She seemed very focused on learning about their lives. On January 6, 1994, around 11 a.m., Jelenia left the hotel alone, wearing a floral dress and a jacket. After that, she was never seen again. Nobody noticed she was missing for about a week. The hotel staff only became suspicious when Masakela tried to pay the bill using one of Jelenia's traveler's checks. He also left her backpack with the staff and never returned for it. Inside were her clothes, camera, passport, and notebooks. Her parents, back in Italy, had not heard from her since New Year's Day. On January 18th, they reported her missing. Police questioned Masakela. He denied harming Jelenia and said he believed she was safe. He admitted making advances toward her, but said she had rejected him. Soon after, he was arrested for an unrelated assault charge from a different woman, but was released because there wasn't enough evidence. Police had no proof connecting him to Jelenia's disappearance, though her parents strongly suspected him. Another theory came from a security guard's report. Around 11 p.m. on January 6, the same day Jelenia vanished, he saw a blonde woman sitting near the Mississippi River. He asked her to leave, but she told him she belongs in the water anyway, before diving in. He said she seemed like a strong swimmer and didn't look like she would do anything to be harmed, but she got caught in the current and disappeared. The Coast Guard searched, but never found a body. The clothing he described sounded like what Jelenia had been wearing. Still, he wasn't sure if the woman was her, and her parents refused to believe it. The very next day, a Croatian fisherman in New Orleans claimed he met a young Italian woman who matched Jelenia's description. He said he was certain it was her. Over the years, many possible sightings of Jelenia were reported, but none confirmed. Some people believed she had been kidnapped because of her famous parents. Others thought she had chosen to disappear and start a new life. Her parents held different beliefs. Romina, her mother, always believed Jelenia was alive. In 2014, she was officially declared presumed dead. Even so, her case remains unsolved. Last image of Deborah Gale Stone, an 18-year-old honors student who graduated from Santa Ana High School in June 1974. A month later, she was crushed at a rotating stage in a theater attraction shortly after being hired as a cast member at Disneyland. On the 25th of October 2016, a terrible accident happened at Dreamworld, a theme park in Australia. A river rapids ride stopped working properly, and 4 people died in the most disturbing and brutal way. Dreamworld first opened in 1981 with only a few rides. Visitors could enjoy an IMAX theater, a small train, a log flume, and a vintage car ride. Over the years, the park grew bigger and added more attractions. There were roller coasters, a wildlife park, and many other rides. The park was divided into different zones with special themes. One zone was called the DreamWorks Experience, where rides were based on popular DreamWorks movies like Kung Fu Panda and Madagascar. Another area was the town of Gold Rush, themed after Australia's gold rush in the 1800s. The Thunder River Rapids ride, which would later be the scene of the tragedy, opened in this zone in 1986. The Thunder River Rapids ride was a circular water ride, similar to many other rides found in theme parks around the world. Usually, rides like this are made by a company called Intamin, which is well known for building safe rides, but Dreamworld chose to build this ride itself, making it a custom design. People riding the attraction would sit in round rafts that could hold 6 passengers. The rafts were loaded from a rotating platform so people could get in without stopping the ride. Once the raft started moving, it traveled slowly along a water channel with tunnels and artificial rapids. Riders would bump, splash, and get wet, which was all part of the fun. The water in the ride moved because the channel had a slight downward slope. This gentle slope allowed the rafts to float along without needing any engines inside them. But after completing the ride, the rafts had to be lifted back up to the starting point so new riders could get on. Dreamworld used a conveyor belt for this. The rafts, with people still in them, would move up the belt and return to the loading platform. To keep the water moving, Dreamworld relied on 2 strong water pumps. These pumps pushed water back to the start of the ride so the next raft could float along the course. On that day in October 2016, one of the pumps failed. This caused the water level in the ride to drop. One of the rafts reached the top of the conveyor belt but became stuck because there wasn't enough water to float it forward. The conveyor belt kept moving, carrying another raft up the ride. This second raft, carrying 6 guests, collided with the stuck raft. The first raft fell back into place, but the second raft was pushed up vertically by the belt. 4 of the people in this second raft were thrown out. They landed on the moving conveyor belt, which was still going. Tragically, these victims were either crushed under the stuck raft or trapped in the machinery beneath the belt. All 4 of them died. 2 children on the second raft survived. They held on to the raft while it stood vertically and were able to climb to safety once the belt stopped. After the accident, the ride was evacuated and Dreamworld closed while rescue teams worked to recover the bodies. It took until the next morning to remove them safely. The process was so shocking that some paramedics needed counseling afterward. The park stayed closed for a month, both to respect the victims and to allow a full investigation. In July 2020, the park was charged under Australia's work health and safety laws and pleaded guilty. The parent company, Ardent Leisure, was fined $3.6 million, the largest fine ever given for a workplace accident in Queensland. The Thunder River Rapids ride was demolished in November 2016. The victims included Kate Goodchild, her 12-year-old daughter, Kate's brother Luke Dorset, and his partner Ruzbeh Aragi. Kate's daughter was the only survivor from their group. Also killed was Cindy Lowe, whose 10-year-old son survived. All 4 victims were on holiday and had come to Dreamworld to enjoy the rides, trusting that the park was safe. Takashi Yokoyama, a Japanese racing driver who was launched off the back of another car and into the metal beam supporting the starting lights. The organizers immediately deployed a safety car to enable the marshals to clean the accident. Whilst most of the pack was cruising behind the safety car, Takashi Yokoyama, who had started the race back in 17th place, did not notice the field slowing down and, about to complete the first lap, came upon the other cars traveling at a speed of 160 miles per hour. Takashi's Dallara hit another vehicle and was launched 5 meters into the air, crashing into the gantry, carrying the signboard over the main straight. The car disintegrated upon impact, scattering debris over 500 meters and killing Yokoyama instantly. Mary Surratt, 1865, the first woman executed by U.S. federal government, along with Lewis Powell, David Harold, and George Atzerodt, moments before they were hanged for their role in the conspiracy to assassinate President Abraham Lincoln. Mary Surratt had strong feelings for the Southern cause during the Civil War. She was once married to a tobacco farmer who supported the South. After he died, she had to support herself. She rented out her farm in Maryland and ran a boarding house in Washington, D.C. The house was in a convenient location for passing messages, and soon, Confederate agents started coming there. Mary's son, John Surratt, played a key role in the secret activities around the boarding house. While some historians think Mary might have been innocent, John was clearly involved. During the war, he helped send secret messages for the Confederates. He even developed clever ways to hide mail so it would not be discovered. Through these secret activities, John met John Wilkes Booth, who became a frequent visitor to Mary's boarding house. John Surratt eventually joined a plan to kidnap President Abraham Lincoln. That plan later turned into Lincoln's assassination. Years later, John admitted he was involved in the plot, but unlike his mother, he managed to escape serious punishment. After Lincoln was shot, Booth ran away from the theater. He was later found hiding in a barn in Virginia and was shot by soldiers. Investigators quickly realized that the Surratt boarding house had been involved in the plot. They arrested Mary Surratt, while John had already become a suspect for other crimes. He fled the country, running to places like Canada, Rome, and Egypt. Authorities eventually caught him, but in the immediate aftermath of Lincoln's death, Mary was left to face the anger of a grieving nation. A tavern keeper who rented property from her said that Mary had helped Booth and another conspirator prepare guns on the day of Lincoln's murder. Because the country was so upset, the conspirators were tried in a military court instead of a normal court. They were found guilty and sentenced to death. Mary's relationship with the conspirators looked suspicious. She was friendly with Booth, and sometimes they spent time together socially. Her strong support for the South was also mentioned during the trial. Some people think the trial was unfair, but historians note that the court even suggested she might be shown mercy. No woman had ever been executed by the U.S. government before, and 5 out of 9 commissioners recommended leniency. President Andrew Johnson, however, wanted a strict punishment. He believed that sparing Mary could set a dangerous example. Many people, including priests and Mary's daughter Anna, pleaded for her life. Anna even went to the White House to speak to the president, but her request was refused. Newspapers reported that onlookers were moved to tears by Anna's pleas. Mary Surratt was led to the scaffold, dressed in black. Her son John, meanwhile, was absent and called a coward by one newspaper. After Mary's execution, John was eventually brought back to the United States from Egypt in 1867. He faced trial by a normal jury and was acquitted, possibly because some jurors sympathized with him as a Southerner. Historians still debate Mary's guilt. Some believe she was punished more for the fear and anger caused by Lincoln's assassination than for her own actions. The absence of her son, the public hysteria, and President Johnson's harsh decision all likely contributed to her death sentence. Emanuela Orlandi was just 15 years old when she disappeared on June 22, 1983. Most missing teenager cases happen all over the world, but hers became famous because she lived in Vatican City, the tiny country where the Pope lives. Vatican City has its own laws and rules, separate from Italy, making it very different from anywhere else. Emanuela's father worked for the Vatican, and so had her grandfather. On the day she vanished, she had just finished her second year of high school and was on her way to a music lesson. She wore jeans, a white shirt, and gym shoes. She arrived late and seemed distracted, asking to leave early. Earlier that day, she told friends she wanted to run away and sell Avon cosmetics. Later, after her music lesson, she called her sister and said a man had offered her money to sell Avon. Her sister told her to talk to their parents first. That evening, Emanuela was seen talking to a woman with red hair. The last sighting of her was when she got into a green BMW, and witnesses saw an Avon bag in the car. She was supposed to meet her sister later, but she never arrived. From that moment, Emanuela vanished without a trace. Vatican City is known for secrecy and mystery. People often speculate about what goes on behind its walls. 3 days after Emanuela disappeared, a man calling himself Pierluigi contacted her family. He claimed a girl named Barbara, who looked like Emanuela, was selling cosmetics. Another man, Mario, said the same thing. These names were likely false. Then Pope John Paul II made a public statement asking for Emanuela's return. This made her even more valuable in the eyes of anyone holding her, because now they knew the Pope was personally concerned. 2 days later, a mysterious man nicknamed L'Americano called both the Vatican and the Orlandi family. He demanded the release of a man who had tried to assassinate the Pope 2 years earlier. This man was named Mehmet Ali Agca. The caller did not show proof of holding Emanuela, but he had copies of her music school registration and sheet music for her flute. Soon after, other groups claimed responsibility for Emanuela's disappearance. One mentioned another missing girl, Mirella Gregori, who vanished in the summer of 1983 under different circumstances. She had answered the intercom at her apartment for a supposed friend and never returned. An Italian Secret Service agent named Giulio Gangi tracked the BMW Emanuela got into. He found the mechanic who repaired the car after someone had tried to break out from inside. The mechanic gave him the woman's name who brought the car in, but when Giulio visited her, she refused to talk. Back at his office, he was told not to pursue it. In 2025, a new development arose. The Vatican agreed to open 2 tombs in Vatican City to search for the remains of a teenage girl who disappeared decades ago. A lawyer had received a letter with a photo of an angel statue in the Teutonic Cemetery, suggesting Emanuela might be buried there. DNA tests will check if any remains belong to her. However, many believe the Vatican has always been secretive and may know more than it admits. Over the years, rumors about Emanuela's disappearance have suggested involvement by the Vatican, criminal gangs, and even international groups. Some theories claim she was used in an abuse ring connected to officials, while others think she was kidnapped to get leverage over the Vatican. Emanuela's friends said she felt followed before she vanished, and her family had even disconnected their phones out of fear. Her family, including 4 siblings, has waited decades for answers. Despite new searches and investigations, many believe the truth may never be revealed because of the Vatican's power and secrecy. Until then, Emanuela Orlandi's story remains a mystery. The last moments of John Brown. His last words were, "I, John Brown, am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away, but with blood." John Brown was one of the most debated figures in American history. Some people saw him as a hero who gave his life to fight against slavery, while others believed he was a dangerous man who caused unnecessary violence. His story is filled with faith, determination, failure, and bloodshed. John Brown was born on May 9, 1800 in Torrington, Connecticut. His father, Owen, was a hardworking man who made shoes, tanned leather, and farmed. Owen also had strong religious beliefs and hated slavery. John grew up in this strict religious household. His family moved to Hudson, Ohio, when John was still young, and there Owen became a respected businessman in the community. As a boy, John thought about becoming a minister, but he had to leave school because he could not afford it. He went back to working in his father's tannery and later tried to run his own businesses. But John Brown was not easy to get along with. He was serious, rarely joked, and had piercing eyes that made people uncomfortable. He also thought he was smarter than everyone else and did not like being questioned. Even his own brothers said he gave orders like a king. One belief John inherited from his father was a deep hatred of slavery. In the early years of the United States, slavery was already a huge problem. Many of the founding fathers admitted it was wrong, but they left it in place. By the early 1800s, the invention of the cotton gin made slavery even more important to the South's economy. Large plantations depended on enslaved workers, and the divide between North and South kept growing. In the 1830s, the abolitionist movement began to grow stronger in the North. Religious revivals during this time painted slavery as a terrible sin. Writers like William Lloyd Garrison spoke out boldly against it. Still, most abolitionists wanted peaceful change through laws, not violence. Even after a slave revolt led by Nat Turner in 1831, most people, including Northern newspapers, condemned violence. At this time, John Brown was more focused on his own family and business struggles. He married twice. His first wife, Dianthe, died young, and he later married Mary. Between the two marriages, he fathered 21 children, though 10 died young. His surviving children grew up under strict discipline. Unfortunately, John Brown's businesses mostly failed. Whether it was land deals, wool trading, or tanning, he often lost money and went bankrupt. He blamed others instead of himself and seemed to believe he was always right. Some people even questioned his sanity. By the 1850s, Brown had moved to North Elba, New York, a small settlement where freed slaves were trying to build new lives. He worked with them by teaching them farming skills, and he also became active in the Underground Railroad, helping enslaved people escape to freedom in Canada. By then, slavery was a more urgent national issue. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 worsened tensions by allowing new territories to decide for themselves whether to allow slavery. This led to violent clashes in Kansas between pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers. Brown's sons, who had moved to Kansas, wrote to him for help. He joined them, bringing weapons. In 1856, after hearing that pro-slavery forces had attacked the town of Lawrence and that Senator Charles Sumner had been beaten in Congress, Brown snapped. With his sons and followers, he carried out the Potawatomi Massacre, where they dragged pro-slavery men from their homes and killed them with swords. This brutal act shocked the nation and set off a small war in Kansas known as Bleeding Kansas. Brown believed violence was the only way to end slavery. He began to see himself as God's chosen soldier. Many people admired his passion, even if they didn't agree with his methods. Brown, however, was planning something much bigger. He dreamed of sparking a massive slave rebellion. Brown believed that enslaved people would join him if given weapons. His target was the federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry, Virginia, which held thousands of rifles. On October 16, 1859, Brown and 21 men attacked Harper's Ferry. They captured the arsenal and took hostages, including a relative of George Washington. But Brown had made a huge mistake. He had no way to alert enslaved people to come and join him. Instead, local militias surrounded the town. The next day, U.S. Marines led by Colonel Robert E. Lee stormed the building where Brown and his men were trapped. After a brief fight, Brown was captured, badly wounded. Most of his men were killed or taken prisoner. Brown's raid failed, but it made headlines across the nation. In the South, people were terrified and furious, calling him a terrorist. In the North, some began to see him as a martyr for freedom. His trial was swift. He was found guilty and sentenced to death. Even in prison, Brown remained calm and spoke with great conviction. He said he was willing to die for the cause of ending slavery. On December 2, 1859, John Brown was hanged. His last note predicted that slavery in America would only end in bloodshed. Just 2 years later, the Civil War broke out after Southern states tried to leave the Union. John Brown's raid had not freed a single slave, but it had shaken the nation to its core.